Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience as we worked on some technical difficulties. Pleased to address the community today. Our message is specific to the current COVID-19 situation in the city of Syracuse. As we all have grown accustomed to, the county executive and the governor have been providing their daily briefings, and it's been very useful information, providing good, sound, factual public health information that we're all using to inform our decision making. We've tried to communicate city-specific issues in a variety of different ways through a variety of different means to make sure that our diverse constituency is receiving critical information, and we thought we would try today to bring together a few of our city leaders to just provide an overall update. We've been in this crisis now for over a month, and what we found is people want good factual information. There's a lot of information out there, but we want to continue to provide it to them in a way that they can inform their own decision making and hopefully have some peace of mind in terms of what's happening here in the city of Syracuse. I have a number of my colleagues with me. We have, of course, our Superintendent Jaime Alisea here. Jaime, thanks for joining us. We have our chiefs, Chief Buckner from the Police Department, Chief Mons from the Fire Department, and we have our Deputy Mayor Sharon Owens. Sharon, thank you for being here as well. So, a few things. As far as our agenda, we'll provide a quick update on COVID-19. We will give an update on the status of city services and also specific information around public safety. The superintendent will then provide an update on education, and we will open it up for questions. I want to start where we've tried to be focused from the beginning, and that's by saying thank you. Throughout this crisis, we've had so many of our neighbors, our colleagues, our coworkers rise to the occasion, and it's really important that we acknowledge their efforts and thank them. That's why we started our Say Thank You campaign, which we're now in the third week of. The first week we focused on the city workforce and specifically our sanitation workers who have a very difficult job every day, but it's never been as difficult and as stressful as it is right now in the midst of this pandemic, and we wanted to acknowledge their importance as well as so many other essential city workers. Last week we celebrated and thanked our teachers. As both a father and mayor, I've been blown away by what our teachers have done to support our children as they've had to deal with their own challenges throughout this crisis, and we certainly appreciate our teachers and all of our school district staff. And this week we're acknowledging our families. I think we've all been on Zoom calls, WebEx calls, and we see how many people have to juggle a lot of responsibilities at home, being a parent, being a teacher, and doing their job. And so it's important that we acknowledge and celebrate our families who are arguably the most essential workers or essential people that we have. As always, we want to acknowledge our first responders and our healthcare workers who are literally on the front lines during this pandemic. We are forever in their debt. So a quick update on COVID-19 in the city of Syracuse. The county executive again provides daily updates, and so I expect at 3 o'clock he'll have some updated numbers for you. So the numbers I'm sharing are as of yesterday. Within the city of Syracuse, as of yesterday, we had 328 cases of COVID-19. That represents 45% of the total cases in Onondaga County. The county has tracked the rate of cases per 10,000 people, and the city of Syracuse has the second highest rate. We are continually working with the county trying to extrapolate data that can shed light on more on those numbers. As you would imagine, being the largest population in the county is going to drive some of those numbers. Certainly there's been a lot of discussion about the role of density and how in more dense urban environments they may be more conducive to the spread of COVID-19. We also know that the concentration of our healthcare facilities, and specifically our nursing homes. We do have a number of large nursing homes in the city of Syracuse that have some of whom have struggled with cases, and so we do think that those are driving some of our numbers upwards. And again, we're trying to get more data to confirm many of these assumptions, but based on our conversations with the county, we don't believe that there are any extenuating circumstances or any behavior differences within the city of Syracuse that are accounting for those higher numbers. Again, as of yesterday, countywide, 724 cases total, active cases 279, recoveries 422, and unfortunately 23 deaths within Onondaga County. And our thoughts and prayers are with those families. Some specific updates, public safety. So again, we have Chief Buckner and Chief Mons who can answer specific questions afterwards, but just some general updates. No positive COVID cases in the Syracuse Police Department. We are extremely fortunate to have that. When you look at what other departments have dealt with in other parts of the country and even other parts of the state, we're very fortunate to have 0 positive COVID test results for any SPD personnel. On the same note, staffing levels are within a normal range. And again, in the midst of the crisis, with not only the health risk, but the stress and anxiety that comes along with these jobs, it's a testament to our men and women in the police department that they have been able to operate normally, relatively speaking. And there's been a lot of questions about calls regarding violations of the governor's executive order around social distancing and essential businesses. Quick update there, we are up to 348 total calls for executive order violations. A breakdown of those calls, which we weren't initially reporting, 300 of those calls involve individuals, people congregating, and 48 of those calls involve issues with businesses. They can be twofold. They can be non-essential businesses that are operating illegally, and they can be essential businesses that are not practicing social distancing and safe practices. So again, 300 of those calls individuals, 48 businesses. Of all of those business reports, we have submitted 5 reports to the State Attorney General's office for those violations, and to my knowledge, none of those businesses are in violation at this point, either because they have closed or because they have complied with safe practices. Fire department, similar to the police department, very fortunate, 0 positive test results for COVID-19 among our Syracuse Fire Department. They fairly early on revised their procedures and policies to maximize the ability of the firefighters to respond to emergencies, and that has proven to be a very good move. We are working with 911 to make sure that responding firefighters are receiving critical information to properly prepare for a COVID response. And we anticipate the fire department operating under the current policies and procedures for the foreseeable future. Again, very fortunate to have 0 cases, and again, a testament to our men and women in the fire department and the work that they've done to keep themselves and to keep the rest of us healthy. A little bit more information on each of the departments, just some data that we're tracking. For the police department, there's been a lot of questions about how the pandemic has impacted crime, and it's interesting. So we have seen an overall slight increase in Part 1 crime incidents when we compare this year over last year. That's obviously not good. If you dig down a little bit more into those numbers, you do see a few more positive trends. Our violent crime is down significantly. I think I have the numbers here, and I'm sure the chief can back me up on them, but violent crime year over year is down about 9%. So that's good. It's very good. Unfortunately, property crime is up 11%. Specifically, what's driving those numbers is burglaries. So that's an ongoing problem that the police department is working very hard on. And overall calls for service are slightly down as well, about 2%. So we're continuing to look at that data and try to determine its impact on the department and on the community. In the fire department, we've seen an overall drop in calls. That's EMS calls. Specific to fire calls, just about the same number year over year, but again, the EMS calls are down pretty significantly, as I think you can see there on the chart. Other city services. Our priority from the beginning has been to ensure the safety and health of our employees and of our constituents. All of our city facilities, buildings are closed to the public. We do have some on-site staffing where necessary and essential. We have moved a significant portion of our workforce into remote work environments, and we are being able to deliver all of our critical services. There have been a few minor impacts on services that I want to update. One for city residents who haven't been able to get their yard waste picked up. We did delay yard waste pickup during the month of April. It was not a staffing capacity issue. It was really a staff health and safety issue. The way in which we traditionally have picked up yard waste, we put a lot of people in one truck, bring them out to the site, and then they're working very closely together. So we've spent the last few weeks looking at the way in which we do that work, modifying our practices, and we will be prepared to restart yard waste pickup in the month of May. The sewer division is performing all functions with the exception of actually going inside homes, and I think for understandable reasons, and we expect that to continue for the foreseeable future, but again, all other sewer services are being provided. Road reconstruction has not been impacted. We continue to fill potholes right now, and as is always the case this time of year, full road reconstruction, all of our road recon projects will begin at will start to roll out at the end of May. And our water department continues operations. We obviously want to make sure that people continue to have access to clean, fresh water, and I'm pleased to report that they do. Parks. We had a lot of discussion around parks. Obviously, those are natural places where you have people convene, oftentimes in large gatherings. That's something that we've worked very hard to eliminate. Unfortunately, we did have to remove our basketball rims last month, and we have closed all of our facilities, all of our playgrounds, all of our tennis courts. All of that is closed. What is open is our parks for passive recreation while practicing social distancing. We noticed that our parks have seen an increase in usage, and in light of that, we decided for our larger parks that have ring roads that are typically accessible to traffic, over the weekends, we close those roads to traffic under our weekend walks program to give people more space to walk, and that has been very successful both in usage and in, again, making sure that everyone is safe. Also on parks, want to remind everyone that our golf courses at Burnett Park and Sunnycrest are closed and will continue to be. Typically, we open them at the beginning of May. They will remain closed until the New York on pause order is lifted. So let's talk about financial impact. That's something that I certainly have spent a lot of time talking about, and as is the case with so many other things during this pandemic, it's a moving target. Just to give you some context, we delivered our budget, the administration's budget, to the Common Council at the beginning of the month, April 8th. At that time, we estimated a negative impact on revenue due to COVID-19 for both the current fiscal year 20, which ends the end of June, and fiscal year 21, which begins July 1st. We estimated a total revenue loss of up to $20 million. Fast forward to April 24th, today. I just received our latest projections from our finance office, and we have moved that projection up to nearly $30 million of potential revenue loss due to COVID-19. Much of that, as you can imagine, is sales tax. We started looking at the State Association of Counties and their estimates of sales tax declines. Their initial estimate was anywhere from 4 to 12% for calendar year 2020, we wanted to be conservative, so we went with that 12% projection. In our conversations with Onondaga County, we have revised our projection to 25% decline in revenue, and so that's reflected in that bigger number. That $30 million of anticipated revenue loss does not take into consideration what the governor has discussed recently. Obviously, the state is also under a significant financial pressure, and the governor had talked about the potential of a 20% cut of existing state aid. What that means for the city of Syracuse is between $14 and $15 million additional revenue loss, which, needless to say, would be devastating for the city of Syracuse. Also, significant negative impact on the school district as well, I think, based on my last conversation with the superintendent, in the range of $60 to $80 million if the state were to advance that with that 20% cut. And again, the superintendent can talk more about where they are with their numbers. That brings us to the federal stimulus programs. Many of you heard me advocating passionately for state and local governments to be included in the last round of federal stimulus. That did not happen. That was incredibly disappointing. The way that I've been talking about it, local governments are the foundation of our communities. We provide these essential services that we've been talking about: police services, fire services, sanitation services. If that foundation is strong, it will be that much more likely that we can recover from this crisis. If that foundation is weakened, and it is weakened right now, it is going to make it that much more difficult to recover. Not only do we provide those essential services, we provide jobs ourselves. We are large employers. And again, we need the federal government's help. The bad news is state and local governments were not included in the last stimulus round. The good news is our federal representatives, our federal delegation, have been rock solid in their support of securing resources for state and local governments. Congressman Katko, I'm in touch with regularly, as is the county executive. I know he fought very hard for it, as did our two senators, Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand. We're in touch with their offices regularly. They fought hard for it. They didn't get it. They assure us that they are focused on securing that aid in the next stimulus package. Again, I could not overstate the significance of receiving that federal aid. The impact without it, again, will be devastating for all of us. A few other things I want to talk about. There's been a lot of discussion lately around the topic of restart. And it's an important conversation to have as it relates to our economy and how we begin to get back to some semblance of normalcy. But I want to try to reset people's expectations around restart. I think that often when people hear the term restart or reopen, they envision someone flipping a switch. We're all in, what we're calling our now normal, our new normal, maximizing social distancing, many people staying at home, and that somehow when we talk about restart or reopening, we're going to flip a switch. Everyone's going to walk out of their houses, give everybody hugs, and get back to work. That's not going to happen anytime soon, even as we begin to open up our economy. The way that I think is more appropriate to characterize it, rather than flipping a switch, is opening a valve. Right now, we have a certain number of businesses that are open, that have been deemed essential. Those essential businesses, because there hasn't been an instruction manual, that list has continued to evolve. And I think even recently, you're seeing that things can change even as we are on pause. A good example of that is elective surgeries opening back up. So the question is, how can we begin to re-engage our economy, get more people to work, to do it in a safe way? I can't emphasize enough that all of the decisions that we've made up to this point and all of the decisions that we will make going forward, especially as it relates to the economy, will be driven by public health data. The data has to drive the decision-making. County Executive McMahon has said that consistently. That's what we used when we made decisions about schools, about parades, and other public events, and that will continue to be the case. So as we start to look at, what again a restart looks like, it's identifying what occupations, what job opportunities above and beyond what are currently being done now could begin to take place where we could maintain that safety, that overall safety, and to keep the curve flat. So as an example, think about the manufacturing sector. Right now, 80% of our manufacturers in the region are operating. They are deemed essential. They're operating at about 75% capacity. So when we talk about a restart, when you think about the early phases, it's not, again, going back to normal people gathering in places. It's thinking about asking questions like, okay, so of those 80% of manufacturers, how can we begin to introduce additional work into those facilities to get them up to 100% capacity? And can we do that in a safe way based on the new practices that they've introduced to be healthy? And how can we take that 20% of additional manufacturers that have been deemed non-essential and begin to reintroduce them? So those are the types of decisions that we're going to be making. And again, I think that people become overwhelmed when they think about the idea of a restart. But instead of thinking about it as a linear process, think about it more of kind of a flow chart. So the county executive and other counties and their health departments and cities are starting to look at what are those metrics that are going to drive that decision making. So looking at things like hospital bed capacity, testing capacity, PPE capacity. And so you identify those set of metrics and you say, okay, based on if we are here, we can do the following. And if additional employers and additional occupations are introduced, then we evaluate the data and we look at it and we make a decision from there. Either as a result of those actions, we saw numbers go up, and in that case, we likely have to take a step back, or if the numbers may stay level or go down, we might be in a position to take that next step. But it's a very intentional process that will be driven by healthcare data because what we know up to this point is that what we've been doing with social distancing has been working, and we don't want to take a step back from what has been working. But we do need to have these conversations. They're critically important because ultimately I think, as the governor has said, we really need to reimagine what life looks like post-COVID-19. So even when we do open up certain sectors and certain occupations, it's highly likely that the vast majority of those are going to look very different when they reopen than they did before the pandemic. So hopefully that gives you a little bit better of a sense of what we're looking at when it comes to a restart. But I assure you we are all working very hard, being thoughtful, and listening to the experts as we have from the beginning. Just a few more updates, and then I want to turn it over to Superintendent Alisea. Again, along those lines of getting our economy going again, looking at some of our major initiatives. Just a few updates. We've talked about the STEAM school, which was included in the state budget. We are anxious to advance that project forward. As we've looked at the initiatives that we've undertaken from an economic development standpoint, we know that many of the areas that we've been investing in, connectivity, the Internet of Things, are areas that are more important than ever now as we look to connect in new and different ways. So we're working with the county right now to advance the financing of the STEAM school, working with the school district and local employers on the curriculum. We're excited to move that project forward. A number of other projects, our Streetlight Conversion project had been going strong up until the pandemic, continued throughout. Some of it is currently on pause, but we've got at last count, about 13,000 lights installed of the total, which is a little over 17,000. So we're currently in touch with NYPA about getting that project going again. Our 5G wireless installations have started. Again, when you look at the importance of connectivity, those are important technology infrastructure investments that we need to continue to make, and we are. Resurgent Neighborhoods Initiative. As we start to look at what are the long-term impacts of this crisis, we have significant concerns around housing. And that's what makes the Resurgent Neighborhoods Initiative so important. We are looking at proceeding with the construction of new single-family homes this year in 2020. We have funding in place to begin that process. There's more to be done there, but again, those are things that we want to continue. Last thing before I turn it over to the superintendent that I want to talk about is the census. I've talked about it before. A lot of people have reached out asking how can they be helpful in this crisis. I want to reiterate that one way everyone can be helpful is to fill out their census. So looking at the numbers, as of yesterday, our current response rate in Syracuse is, and this is self-response rate, is 41.3%. Good news is that's higher than some of our counterpart upstate cities. I don't want to say bad news, but I think for some additional context, the final self-response rate in 2010 was 61.7%. In Onondaga County, that response rate is at 55%. So we have a lot of work to do. The self-response process has been extended through August 15th in light of the pandemic, so people have more time before people start knocking on their doors. So it's critically important that people fill out their census. If you get it in the mail, follow the directions, get online, fill out the census. If you haven't seen it in the mail, you think it was lost, you can still get on the census website and fill it out. We have had to modify a lot of our outreach given the current pandemic, but we are continuing to look for new and creative ways to engage, especially with our hard-to-count populations, of which the city has many, to make sure that we get those numbers up. There's a direct correlation between the amount of federal aid that we get and our population. So it's critically important that everyone does their part to make sure that they're counted. So when we look to the federal government for aid, whether it's related to COVID-19 or beyond that, that we get our fair share. Okay, I think I will turn it over to the superintendent to talk about schools, where a lot of good work has been done, and then we'll open it up for questions. Superintendent.
Thank you, Mayor Walsh, and thank you to all of you for being here today. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this conference and to share with you some of the things that we have done in the Syracuse City School District to support our students, to support our families. This is a new territory for all of us. I remember being the principal at Fowler High School during the storm of '98, and we needed to come up with some plans to address the needs of the student at that time because of the damage that the building suffered, but nothing compares with what we have to do today with COVID-19. We have had a lot of support from many community agencies, and we appreciate that. So the first thing that we needed to do in the Syracuse City School District was to establish a meal program for our students. We began on March 17 with a meal distribution program in 29 different sites through our community. We're doing that on Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesday. Monday, we'll give them meals for Mondays and Tuesdays, on Wednesday for Tuesdays and Wednesday, and on Fridays. So we're serving around 6,000 meals every day in the Syracuse City School District. So far, we have we have served more than 200,000 meals for the students in the city of Syracuse. These are for students that are in the ages between pre-K all the way to high school. So I want to commend our food service department. I want to commend the partnership that we have with Mercy Works, Abundant Life, the Julie and Jim Foundation, because on Fridays, our families are able to come to the centers and get meals for the weekend. So again, it's been a community effort, and I want to commend these agencies for the work that they're providing to us. As you can see, we're all over the city, 29 different sites, including buses that are parked at the Westcott Center, at the Syracuse Catholic Charities, and we're offering meals for those students in those locations. So I want to say that we're not only there, but we have also the partnership with First Students, and we're delivering meals to more than 400 students every day that they can get to this site. What do we do in the Syracuse City School District? We need to educate. We teach every day to our kids. And we needed to change from being in front of our students every day to provide online learning for our kids. And we began to do that in different ways. We began to prepare packets that were mailed or delivered to our kids. We handed out laptops for some of our students. Our teachers needed to become more familiar with different platforms like Seesaw, Canvas, and so were our parents. So it's a different way of teaching, it is a different way of learning, but our students, our staff are working together, and I really have to commend our staff and our families that they have get used to learning in a different way. So thank you to our teachers, thank you to our administrators for the work that they're doing. One of the things that we did was communicating with WCNY, because we know that about 40% of our kids do not have access to internet at home, and we wanted to make sure that every student had access to instructions. So I want to say thank you to WCNY, thank you to Mitch Gilman. Immediately he said, anything that you need to support the students, we're there with you. So we began classroom TV program for our students. This is a program that is not only for these kids in Syracuse, but there are kids in 18 different counties that are receiving the benefit of having instruction using the TV. They don't need to have cable, they don't need to have satellite. The old way, for those of us who are a little older, of using TVs with the different kind of antennas, remember those, the rabbit ears, they can access that information. As you can see, we are on the air from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The mornings are for students from kindergarten to 5th grade. In the afternoon is from 6th to 12th grade. We're doing not only ELA math, but we're also doing social emotional activities to help our students deal with this situation. We have been working with different community agencies, and we continue to say thank you to the county for their support. Different community organizations like Arise, that they have been working with our staff to provide daily lessons not only on TV, but the lessons that our families can download. The staff from Arise, Living Resources, they have been doing Zoom activities or fun activities with our kids, and we appreciate their support. There's also more than two organizations like Peaceful School, Contact, Peace Inc., that they're helping us make phone calls, do home visit, and making sure that our students and our families have the support that they need. I know that one of the questions probably is going to be out there, what is going to happen to the high school students? Well, we have not canceled the prom, we have not canceled graduations yet. We're working to make sure that our high school students will have those opportunities as they are ready to graduate and exit the Syracuse City School District.
Thank you, Superintendent. Okay, questions?
High school students will graduate. We're working with the governor's office. We cannot reopen the schools until the governor reopens the school. We're having weekly meetings with the principals, with the teachers, working on all the details. There are different plans in place, but the kids will graduate from high school.
So every senior is going to graduate?
We're making sure that our teachers, our administrators, our counselors, they're working hard. They're making sure that they're going online using the resources that we have so they will graduate from high school. I'm not expecting a drop in graduation rate.
Mr. Superintendent
Yes.
and Mr. Mayor, I've not heard one political leader statewide, and yesterday we heard from Senator Gillibrand, who thinks that it's feasible for students and teachers to go back into school buildings before September. Do you believe that as well?
We are working with the state officials. There's some things that need to be in place. We talk about social distancing and all that. So today I had a conversation with the governor's office, and there's going to be some guidelines that they're going to put out on how we can return back to school. Being in a classroom, 30 kids, 25 kids, it is hard to keep the 6 feet apart from each other. So we're waiting for the state to give us some guidance. We have a committee that is working on a re-entry plan when the schools are reopened, the things that we need to do to make sure that everyone is safe in our schools.
You've talked to the state. Can you share some of the early guidance that's coming so that families know what may take place when the students go back at some point?
That guidance will be out next week because we have the committee that is working on that. We haven't finished all the plan, and we have to wait also for the plan or the guidelines coming from the state.
Mayor, are you eager to send your children back to school?
Michael, from the beginning, I think when you talk about wanting to projecting towards September, I told you what our budget looked like on April 8th compared to what it looks like today. Things are changing rapidly. No one knows what September is going to look like. I know that right now I'm happy to have my children home and safe and healthy. I can also tell you that they're not so happy about it. We've certainly enjoyed our time together, but they want to see their friends. I, from the beginning, have been very confident that the decisions being made by the county executive and the decisions being made by the governor are being driven by data. And the superintendent has been clear that the governor is going to make the call on schools. And while you may have heard elected officials project on what may or may not happen, we have not heard what the governor's plan is for schools. So if sitting here today, is it hard for me to envision, based on where we are today, that our kids are in schools before the end of the traditional school year? Yeah, it's really hard to envision what that looks like. But for any of us to make definitive statements about what's going to happen much more than a day or two from now, I think is difficult. So I think we need to plan for all potential outcomes, and then based on where we are at any given point and what the data says, we make those decisions.
Specific plans are one thing, but the mayor brings up a whole another aspect, and that is buy-in from moms and dads and caregivers and the teachers and the staff who go into the school buildings. Have you allowed yourself to think about how, beyond the specific plan within a school building, how you go about getting buy-in and trust from teachers and parents and the students who know what's going on?
And Michael, that's part of the plan that we're discussing, because if the parents are not comfortable sending their kids to the school, they're not, and they have the right to do that. And we want to make sure also that the teachers are comfortable coming back to the building and providing the education that our kids are going to need. So we need to look at the social and emotional, not only for the students, but also for the adults that are going to be working and doing the daily instructions in our schools. The first 3 marking period, there was the regular grading system. The 4th marking period, there is a committee that is looking at that at 2 different levels. There is a committee that is looking at the K-5 and another one that is looking at the 6 through 12. And those guidelines will be done hopefully this afternoon for the high school program. And that will be shared with the staff, and that will also be shared with the parents in the community. They're looking at different ways of doing that, whether it's going to be a pass-fail, whether it's going to be a numerical, whether it's going to be a combination of both. The committee is looking at that area. The teachers are making contact with the kids, and they're keeping a log of the contact they're making with them, whether it's through Zoom, whether it's a phone call, whether it's a video chat, so all that information is being collected.
Mayor, what contingency plans are you looking at for the budget shortfall? Short-term borrowing, furloughs? What are you looking at?
So we are literally in the middle of the budget process right now. The council has been having budget hearings, and we've been sharing information as it becomes available to help inform that process. We have started doing some contingency planning around different scenarios. We've engaged the council in that process. But a lot of it is going to depend on what, if anything, comes from the federal government. So we have to look at everything from service levels to staffing. The budget that we proposed anticipated maintaining current service levels and staffing, but we've got to make up for the shortfall one way or the other. And again, our goal is to try to maintain the same level of services and employment, but without additional federal support, it's hard to envision how we make that happen, given where our projections are. And they are just that; they're just projections. So it's an ongoing process. But I think if anything, it's the one benefit of having the budget process right now is we can, until that budget is passed, we can use information as it becomes available to update it.
And Mayor, what conversations have you had with Chancellor about fall? All those people, SU shut down in part because they didn't want students to leave and perhaps recognize that. And we're looking at that in reverse.
Yeah.
What conversations have you had with them?
So I last spoke to the chancellor. Boy, it was either at the beginning of this week or late last week. And at that point, he was still very much focused on having students back on campus in the fall. If you think about it, that so much of their business model is based on that happening. And so I know that they're working very hard to try to make sure that can be done in a safe way. So that's where his current line of thinking is. But again, he acknowledged, as we all have, that things are changing rapidly, and we're going to have to adjust to those changing circumstances.
So everyone, maybe we can go around and Chief Hans, Chief Buckner. I'm curious on a personal level for each of you. When you look beyond your rank, whether it's political or in a department of some sort or leading a major organization, where in all of this do you look to and find leadership and comfort? Can I start with you, Chief Hans?
Good afternoon. I always look to my faith when uncertainty comes to my doorstep. We're talking about uncertainty today. As we look back to the end of February, the beginning of March, it was certainly more uncertain then because there was no data. As the mayor was alluding to, we do have some new data sets to try to make decisions on, but personally, when there's uncertainty, I look towards my faith.
I would echo, again, good afternoon. I would echo what Chief Bonds has said. I certainly subscribe to prayer, specifically to make sure that my mind and my heart is guided to do the right thing. Equally important, I'm a proponent of wise counsel. We are the members of multiple professional organizations, specifically International Association of Chiefs of Police, Police Executive Research Forum, NOBLE, National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, and all of those organizations produce almost daily best practices, lessons learned from the things that are going on, and we are in tune with that and making sure that we're doing the things from a public safety standpoint that are reflective of industry best practices.
Similar to what you heard from both chiefs, certainly faith and family are important. But to Chief Buckner's point, I have benefited greatly from communicating with other mayors around the state and around the country. I've developed some very strong relationships with mayors throughout New York State, and we're in regular communication. I've been a part of some Bloomberg Philanthropies initiatives that have put me in a position to participate in virtual convenings with mayors from all around the country, and it's helpful to share best practices, and we've certainly benefited from that, and then just you know, my team, the folks around me. We are so lucky here in Syracuse to have great leadership at every level, and understanding there's no instruction manual for this crisis. I have certainly been heartened by the leadership from the individuals around this room to the county executive, to the governor. I think that in Central New York and in the city of Syracuse, we're fortunate to have really good leadership.
Like they said, my faith, believing in God, the people that I work with every day, the teachers, the administrators, some of the students that I still have the opportunity to get in contact with, and talking to my mother every morning because she thinks that New York State is only New York City, and calls me like, how you doing today? So just making sure and letting her know, no, we're not suffering like New York City is suffering. So, and waiting for her to pray for me.
Everything in my life starts with God first. And then I'm thankful that I've been placed around some very, very smart people. I have always been a proud New Yorker, but I am proud and thankful that I live in the state of New York these days. From the governor's leadership to the collaboration between the county and the city and all of Central New York, all the counties in Central New York. I have witnessed on every level putting the residents and the constituents and the stakeholders of our fine community and the communities that surround us first. I hear in the voices of every leader on every level the humanity of this thing. While we talk about economic resiliency and figuring out how quick to open the faucet, that is not first and foremost in the minds of anyone that I've had a conversation with. It is about the humanity of the people on the ground. It is how are folks doing? How are our decisions impacting them, from the oldest to the youngest of ours? And so that is what is keeping my faith strong, because I witnessed the humanity of this community. I've always known we've had a strong community, a passionate community, but to see it, to hear it, to feel it from people every single day has been amazing for me. And I'm thankful that we have leadership that put people first while we're trying to make it together through this.
I just want to acknowledge the work of the Deputy Mayor. You didn't get to hear much from her today, but she has been in the weeds on every important issue in this community, especially as it relates to our most vulnerable populations, working with our human services providers, making sure that our homeless and housing vulnerable communities are safe and healthy, working with the school district on meal deliveries, participating in the county department head meetings to make sure that the city and the county are in lockstep. Deputy Mayor has really been the glue that's kept a lot of us together, and appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all for taking the time. Stay healthy and be safe.